I am still to this day grateful that my sponsor told me very early, it is going to get worse before it gets better. And I needed that leveling because I would have used that first moment of difficulty to leave. Well, this isn't what it says. It says in all those
Mm.
promises is going to get awesome and every day is going to be a brighter star and all this. And a lot of what you hear in meetings intentionally is optimistic. And you obviously have those moments of challenge that we share about. But like, I needed to know that this was not going to be roses and unicorns from this day forward so that when it did hit, it wasn't a surprise. And it stuck with me a lot over the years.
I heard it through the grapevine. Welcome. It's the AA Grapevine half-hour variety hour featuring the collected voices of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm Don, an alcoholic in Greensboro, North Carolina.
And I am Olis, an alcoholic in beautiful Oakland, California.
Beautiful Oakland, Californian. Beautiful Olis. How you doing?
Very good, Don. How are you? I feel like I haven't seen you in a while.
Wow, you're sounding like you're in a cavern. What's going on?
I am, again, for people who are regular listeners, in a vacant house.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yet another renovation.
We have a game going. Where in the world is Alice?
Sort of the Where's Waldo of AA.
Alice, I was talking with a bunch of guys after the men's meeting this morning. Now, I'd say that average age of this group was 55.
In keeping with the AA demographics.
It kind of goes with it, doesn't it? And so I asked them, have any of you ever used AI searching for AA information, to search for AA information? And they said, no, nobody had, not one of them. And I asked the same question at Young and Sober, a meeting in Greensboro that's held on the college campus here. And everybody had.
Yeah.
It seemed like to me that the line is about age 25 where people use AI to search for information about Alcoholics Anonymous. They use it as a search engine. When I talk to people about it, particularly older people, they get very upset. Oh no, it's the end of AA. It's terrible. You know, I saw a presentation that Josh did at the North Carolina convention, and he's our guest today. And I want to talk to him a little bit about this because since that time, I've made a model where I've asked it to only use the fourth edition of the big book, the 12 and 12, as Bill sees it, AA.org, and AAGrapevine.org. And then I had to correct it a few times. One time I told it, nope, do not quote anything from any of the literature unless it's an exact quote, because it quoted something from the big book that was not in the big book. It was a paraphrase.
So the model that you used is that AI only answers the question pulling from conference-approved literature.
More than that, because it has the grapevine in it.
Ah, okay.
It also has the archives. It can use the archives of the Grapevine magazine.
The grapevine is conference approved.
The Grapevine is part of AA, but conference approved literature simply means that the conference voted on it. And that's one of the beauties of the Grapevine is the Grapevine doesn't speak for the collective voice of AA. It's the collected voices of AA. So
one of the things I think is interesting about the age divide that you're talking about, the difference in the reaction between older members and younger members,
yeah.
Even I have some prejudice against AI. How do I turn my back on a resource that can really help me? How do I not use a resource that is out there?
Well, you're right. It's already out there.
How are we going to respond? AI is out there. And it's a resource, and some people are using it, and not all of us are. In the same way that the book was out there, and some people were using it, but some people were not.
Yeah.
And I think that's always going to be true when there's a resource on the table. Some people are going to use it, and some people are not. And I think the people who don't use it don't have full access to all the resources that could help them explain the literature, access the resources, answer history questions. Like the archives for Grapevine alone are amazing.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about with Josh E. from Durham, North Carolina. Josh has been a guest on the podcast before. He was on season 3, episode 25.
And I think you saw Josh also present, didn't you?
Yes, he was at the North Carolina convention last summer and did a presentation on AI. And we wanted to get him back onto the show and talk about that and the future of communication in AA.
And I'm really excited also to see whether or not we can lure Josh in to have some discussion with us based on hashtag heard in a meeting.
But first, the news.
There is an opening for AA Grapevine Inc., a non-trustee director position. If you love Alcoholics Anonymous and you love the Grapevine, this is an amazing opportunity to be of service.
Non-trustee directors are AA members selected for their business or professional experience that relate to the activity of the corporation.
A non-trustee director may serve up to 4 successive one-year terms.
For more details and how to apply, visit aagrapevine.org or look in the Grapevine app under Important Updates or the News tab in the AA Meeting Guide app.
And if this is something you're interested in, please move quickly. The deadline is November 12th, 2025.
Hi, folks. We need your stories on the individual traditions. Pick one and write about your or your group's experience with it. How has a tradition played a part in your life? How has your understanding of a tradition changed? What is a personal experience where a tradition played a part? Visit aagrapevine.org for guidelines and to submit.
Yeah, hi, my name is Josh, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July the 7th, 2006. This last July, I celebrated 19 years. My home group is the Basic Text Group in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Josh, with the Basic Text Group, so I imagine that you only study conference-approved literature.
No, we only read one book. We only read the big book at my home group. It's a big book study. We go through the book. It takes about 2.5 years. We go probably like a paragraph a day kind of thing, sometimes a page or so.
So I love a slow walk through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the name of the group is The Dead Giveaway, right?
It is. What positions in service have you held?
I have been a coffee maker down through serving at the bottom of our triangle on the General Service Board, and as a non-trustee director in the Grapevine, as appointed committee member to the Public Information Committee for the General Service Conference for years. And before that, I was my district's DCM, GSR before that. I did corrections for quite some time. Yeah, so service has been a big part of my journey in recovery.
You were one of the people responsible for starting the Grapevine podcast.
Yeah, I participated in a lot of group dynamic conversations at the committee level for the General Service Board as an appointed committee member originally about different communication practices and the potential to create and overlap a lot of different mediums, which included all of our earlier conversations around social media and how to try and see if we can spread and find platforms that we can connect. And yeah, I was part of that conversation when back when y'all were your old podcast. I brought it up as a great example of a podcast that was kind of living into AA's primary purpose and was driven by traditions and had sort of a service center at heart, which was a great example. We were using it as an example originally, and then the idea was, well, wait, why don't we just see if those guys will come do the podcast? And that worked out great. The groups agreed and the committees agreed, and gratefully you guys agreed, and it's been a long time now. And
the rest is
you're growing, and now we have new friends. I got to meet Olis today for the first time, which I'm really grateful to meet you, and I'm so glad that the voices and the faces that do this continue to grow and change. And I think that the work you all do is really important. One of my critical beliefs of our overall communication is that the Grapevine is and should be our primary point of attraction, so that we can get people into meetings with current experience of Alcoholics Anonymous, so that once they get into that meeting, they can find the members of the fellowship that can help walk them through how to get sober with our conference approved literature, like the Big Book and the like.
What is conference approved literature?
Conference approved literature is literature that's gone through our General Service Office and our General Service Conference through the committees on both sides of that discussion, the Literature Committee for the General Service Board, the Literature Committee for the General Service Conference. It's physically generated by the AA World Services Office at our General Service Office in New York. The publishing staff builds it at the request of the fellowship. The trustees committee is responsible for carrying out that request and then checks in with the General Service Conference and the conference committee on progress. And as it goes through that process, feedback is given back and forth. And at the end of that process, a formal vote's taken at the General Service Conference to actually approve that as a piece of conference approved literature.
And so why is the Grapevine not conference approved literature?
So there's two components to that, the Grapevine magazine and the books published by Grapevine. The Grapevine magazine is recognized through Conference Advisory Action as the International Journal of Alcoholics Anonymous, as is Lavinia. The books themselves go through a conference process through the Grapevine Conference Committee, where the potential future issues of book collections are described and discussed about what might be most useful. Typically, that means a list of like 3 ideas the editors are kicking around or 5 ideas the editors are kicking around get put in front of the conference and the delegates in that committee. And they discuss it, and the editorial board takes that feedback. And that's how we end up with stories of AA in the military, stories of women in recovery, the Grapevine book on traditions, which is great. I think the reason that the magazine can't be conference approved is that it's published monthly and it can't go through that annual process. And the books themselves are part of the editorial autonomy of the Grapevine as a corporation and a nonprofit corporation.
So, Josh, for listeners and for myself, I understand you to say that the books that Grapevine publishes are conference approved by a separate conference than the conference that we refer to when we say conference approved.
So I think where you would get disagreement from the conference process is the use of the word approved, because the approved implies a vote that doesn't happen.
On the Grapevine side.
So yeah, there's conference input on which books might get created in the future.
Okay.
And then editorially, the editorial staff ultimately decides which book to pull the trigger on publishing. The content of the books is always directly pulled from AA Grapevine magazine and submissions to the magazine. So the content that ends up making those collections of stories is collected over years and years. They're all stories that have been editorially reviewed, sometimes published previously in the magazine. So there's no surprise endings coming, right? There's not going to be a story in there that would cause any kind of controversy. So the books in the magazine are built out of letters and writings submitted to the Grapevine office from all around this country and Canada and around the world. And those letters are AA members' experience. So the question that I always pose back is, when you're sitting in your home group and we go around the circle and 20 people share, do those people's personal experience need to be approved by a conference? No. I would add that an editorial staff reviews that experience and tries to craft it into themes and ideas to make the magazine engaging and helpful. But ultimately, what you're reading is the most current expression of what AA looks like in 2025, right?
You know, Josh, it's really fascinating listening to you because I'm hearing 2 threads that I want to try to pull together in a question for you. You know, one of the things that Don said was, look, there's this age differential between who's using AI, right, current technology, and who's not. But I hear you then talk about the rich history, the archives of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I would love to hear you talk about how you honor the past, but also step with real courage into the future, because it is here. Whether we put our heads in the sand or not, it is here.
Man, that's a lot in terms of breadth.
I'm drinking from a fire hose, Josh. I'm drinking.
Yeah. Well, I'll say one thing. I moved down to North Carolina from New York City in 2006. And I did so in Geographic at the time. I was in the process. I've been trying to quit drinking on my own for a couple of years at that point. And I know I don't drink normal. I know I abuse alcohol, but I can stop when I want, right? I tried to stop and couldn't. So
Right.
I was in the throes of realizing I was powerless over alcohol. And I did make attempts to try and get help. I tried therapy. I tried going to a church of sorts, and I tried a lot of different avenues. I did not try AA at the time, and didn't know a lot about it, and didn't go in search of it. And within 6 months of moving down here, I was in AA. I
Yeah.
went on a real bender to celebrate my new job in an attempt to get fired. Right, like.
You took yourself with you on the move, huh?
I found AA, by AA standards, what would be considered sort of a traditionalist or conservative community, right? North Carolina AA is very steeped and rooted in history. It has a great connection to the past, and it maintains that in the meeting structures. When I came in, I'm really, really grateful that the foundations of my recovery program, I was introduced to AA through that door. And part of that for me was in my first meeting, I got a sponsor.
You got to sponsor your first meeting?
I did, yeah. My first group that I joined, their group conscience was if someone walked into that meeting looking like I looked, they changed the topic of the meeting to be a step one meeting. So it didn't matter how much time the chair had put into preparing to wow everybody with great insights into how alcoholism works. They would throw it all out the window and make it a step one meeting. And they went around the circle, and everybody shared their experience, and I was just kind of overwhelmed with an emotional connection and a relation to what I was hearing. But the guy that I asked was just the guy sitting to my right, and he didn't talk the whole meeting. I just turned to him and said, "Will you show me how the f this works?" And he said, "Yeah, you want to go to a meeting tomorrow?" And we started into the big book by the end of the week. I had my first business meeting the following week.
Yes. This is
Wow.
why you've had all these years in general service.
Maybe somebody built this warm, nurturing nest that
Yes.
when I was trembling and didn't know what to do, I could walk into and felt loved, understood, and guided.
You hear shared in many meetings by folks. I was one of them that reading God in the Steps was uncomfortable or disconcerting to some, and it was to me. But reading, we have no opinions on outside issues, and reading, you're a member if you say you're a member, and all these things that sort of I could fundamentally believe in off the get of individual and personal freedom, the need to get along and work together in order to move forward as a group. All those principally were really impactful to me emotionally and as an individual.
It's a
Yeah.
new world out there. Talk about how AA and AI fit into the what worked for me isn't necessarily what's going to work for the coming generation.
Interestingly, it's not that revolutionary. Like this AI as a technology is revolutionary, but the potential applications are not unique or new to Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's just like a search engine.
Well, essentially, I mean, I found AA with Google,
Yeah.
right? And when I got started in this conversation, that was part of my story at the time. I gave a presentation at an international conference, and I explained that. I was like, I went to Google to find AA, and it didn't make any sense. What I got back in the search results made no sense. And that led to conversations, not just me leading, but the fellowship had those conversations around how do we use the internet, how do we use search, how do we use social media, all of that. But those conversations get bogged down in fears about what might go wrong. So the presentation that Don saw, I was asked to participate in a Courage to Change presentation, and it was Courage to Change more about the fellowship as a whole and less about personal recovery. And it was a really an easy conversation to suggest. I built just a simple GPT that I directed towards the Grapevine archive, the big book, the 12 and 12, and suggested that it can only answer in those questions. And over time, I kind of twiddled with it to suggest that it only answer, it not tell me what to do in its answers, that it only makes suggestions based on what it reads. Like, there's no reason that I can't show up on the Grapevine app, the AWS app, the AWS website, the Grapevine website, and plug in there, I'm new to this, what do I do? And get back an answer that's drawn directly from our experience since 1935, both in the form of our conference approved literature and also in the form of the tens and maybe hundreds of thousands at this point of stories that have been submitted to the Grapevine by AA members of all walks of life over every decade we've been around, from every corner of the US and Canada, or the globe if we want to. That's just a no-brainer to me. But I hope that conversation is happening in some way, shape, or form.
Well,
You
the
know,
problem with it, Josh, is that as it is now, people are asking those questions to one of these, to a large language model,
hmm
and getting back information that it may be good information, it may not be good information, because there's lots of bad information about AA that's available, and it can be pulling from that as well as it could be pulling from AA information or conference approved information. So if it's not set up, we're kind of missing an opportunity to be able to have a resource that gives good information.
But with all these types of conversations in our process, it takes a very long time for anyone to be at all comfortable with putting that in a place of any sort of official positioning within our fellowship's communication structures. Like,
That's a
I
different
don't,
thing than the
yeah,
individual doing it.
yeah. And I think at the end of the day, like I said, I found AA through Google, and there are kids right now finding AA through ChatGPT. So whether you're worried about the fact that they're getting wrong information from that or not doesn't matter because you can't
Mm-hmm.
do anything about it.
Can't do
You
anything
have
about it.
zero control over that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they're probably getting relatively accurate information, whether we touch it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there is a utility to how we can harness that in a simple tool to make it really easy. I mean, when I did for the workshop, it was I went in and said, "Hey, I've never been to a meeting. Can you tell me what that's like?" And it pulled all this experience about what a meeting is like, and some are like this and some are like that. And I was like, "Can you tell me a story about what a first meeting would be like?" And it pulled a story that it paraphrases from Grapevine. And then I said, "Where'd this come from?" And it's like, "Oh, you can hear lots of stories about Alcoholics Anonymous at aagrapevine.org." Like it just walks it you can walk through those communication flows that we would want to have, and it does it automatically.
Yeah.
But again, I think whether or not that's happening at the bottom of the triangle, all of the things that have been added to the toolkit in the last 10 or 15 years started at the top of
The
the
top of the
triangle,
triangle. That's right.
right? This podcast didn't start at the bottom of the triangle. It started with a couple of active members doing something and trying it. Our app didn't start at the bottom of the triangle. It started in the middle of the triangle, and not even. It started at the top of the triangle. It wasn't a formal thing. It became the National AA Technology Workshop is coming up in November. I think first week in November in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm sure that someone there, if not multiple people, are having this conversation there. I think that our fellowship at the top of the triangle needs to take more ownership of doing their own experimentation as districts and areas to help on a smaller scale work out the kinks of systems like that to then suggest to their fellow districts and fellow areas. And if we spent some time building and filtering those ideas at the top of the triangle, by the time they got to a discussion at the General Service Conference, they may have already worked out all those kinks that we like to argue about for 5 or 10 years.
For people who don't understand the way you're envisioning this, the top of the triangle is the groups of AA, then the individual made up of the individual members of AA, and the bottom of the triangle is the conference.
You know, the courage to change is a beautiful framing for this. And it makes me think
Mm-hmm.
about the thing you'll often hear people say, right? The civilians out in the non-AA world. That if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, right? And this, I think, is true in this instance. And I want to go back to the news announcement that we had. The people who can apply to be a part of our service structure at the bottom of the triangle, if they're people who are comfortable with, have the courage to change, that are people with their finger on the pulse of not what's coming, but what's already here, that begins to close the distance between the top of the triangle and the bottom of the triangle. If we've got more people from the top of the triangle that are the change makers, that are the innovators, that are the people who are willing to sort of accept what is here and see how it's useful, and those people begin to apply for opportunities to serve at the bottom of the triangle, it's a game changer for us as a society. What's your thought about that?
I think it is, but I think that the bottom of the triangle is a place where a conversation happens to take a final group conscience vote. The more diverse voices we have there, the more informed discussions we can have about a group conscience. But the General Service Office and the Office of the Grapevine is not where we experiment. It's where we stamp. It's where we receive, discuss, and agree on. The fellowship has wanton freedom to do whatever the heck it wants and then bring that experience to that conversation. I was talking to a friend recently, past delegate. The Chicago Intergroup publishes its own literature. There's a lot of different structures in how they operate as a local entity that are fascinating to think about in terms of our individual local entities, because that's where we can dry run ideas and then present those results to the larger body of national AA.
Well, Josh, I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but
It's time for hashtag Heard in a Meeting, Josh. We ask you to post interesting things that you've heard on social media with the hashtag Heard in a Meeting. Of course, keep in mind our tradition of anonymity, or you can send them directly to us. Don, come on, tell me, what sort of hashtags do we have today? What trouble can we get Josh into?
these are all things that listeners have sent in to us. This first one is from Steve P. It's hashtag Heard in a Meeting, paid, P-A-I-D, pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. Of course, it's a phrase we've heard in the big book.
But I've not heard that acronym.
I've not heard paid before.
What I find myself doing is trying to relate paid to like making it an action, like you got paid. But I'm like, oof, that sounds mean.
I think it's like a debt paid.
I got paid.
Okay, we received this one from Stu B. in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada.
Hashtag Heard in a Meeting.
Step 1. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives have become unimaginable. It's pretty much the same thing, powerless over alcohol, and our lives have become unimaginable, at least getting sober.
Hashtag Heard in a Meeting.
From Terese M., Phoenix, Arizona. I love the podcast. Huge fan of you all. I wanted to send in my heard in a meeting sentence. I heard Madeline P. from Oregon say, be the person you needed when you got here.
Be the person you needed when you got here. Wow.
Yeah, I was actually thinking amusingly that I like that she gave credit to the person that she heard it from, because what's that old adage? Like, you got to quote him 3 times and then you steal it and say, you said it?
Yes, that's
you gotta
right.
Quote him 3
It's
times
yours
first,
now,
and then you can keep it. So that's at least one on the record. So she's got 2 more, and then she can say it.
Yeah, that's right. She won't have to always give credit to Madeline P. Josh, thank you for being here today.
It was really, really good to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, you as well.
Thank you
It's
for
a
your
real
service
pleasure.
to Alcoholics Anonymous.
Hi, my name is Mandy. I'm an alcoholic from Tucson, Arizona. I subscribe to the Grapevine magazine because it helps alcoholics. I listen to the podcast because cuckoo.
The Grapevine strives to be self-supporting.
Please subscribe to the magazine or app and visit the Grapevine online store.
The app is free in your phone's app store and has great content and features provided at no cost to you.
But if you subscribe, you get so much more. And you support all things Grapevine, including this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Only $2.99 a month. I'm at the very wit's end.
I told my sponsor I had a Jekyll and Hyde personality. He said it was too bad that I'd sobered up the wrong one. It's really not that funny. Thanks for joining us. The AA Grapevine Half-Hour Variety Hour is posted every Monday and is produced by AA Grapevine, Inc. We don't speak for AA as a whole. We share the experience, strength, and hope of members to help others recover from alcoholism. All things Grapevine are available at aagrapevine.org. including our app and how to get in touch with us. Find us on Instagram and YouTube. If you want to know more about AA, visit aa.org or search online for Alcoholics Anonymous and your city.